Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast. Today, we are strapping in for a massive deep dive into a literary monument that is, well, it's far more ferocious, complex, and politically explosive than the simple children's tale it often gets relegated to.
That's right.
We are talking about Gulliver's Travels, which, if you want to sound incredibly well-read at your next dinner party, is formally titled Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World, in 4 parts, by Lemuel Gulliver, first a surgeon and then a captain of several ships.
It's an essential text, but you're right, the popular perception of it is wildly incorrect.
Yeah, completely off.
It's often taught as charming fantasy, but Jonathan Swift wrote it as a profound, biting political and societal satire. It was a massive hit right out of the gate.
It cut across all levels of society, didn't it?
It really did. The poet John Gay famously noted that it was universally read from the cabinet council to the nursery.
That dual audience is just fascinating. Politicians and children likely getting 2 entirely different experiences out of the same pages.
And that contrast feels intentional.
Like it's designed to disarm you before delivering this massive critical blow.
Absolutely. Jonathan Swift himself claimed he wrote the work not just to entertain, but specifically to vex the world rather than divert it.
To vex the world. I love that.
It's a calculated act of irritation built around an elaborate structural framework. The 4 voyages are essentially 4 distinct lenses he applies to examine and brutally critique human nature.
And not just human nature in the abstract.
No, not at all. He's also targeting the specific intellectual and political fashions of the early 18th century in Europe. So we'll track the fictional Lemuel Gulliver across these 4 distinct, bizarre worlds.
Unpacking Jonathan Swift's elaborate critique every step of the way. We want to help you understand why this travelogue remains one of the most devastating political satires ever written.
Exactly.
So before we set sail with Gulliver, let's start with the man who invented the Lilliputians and the Yahoos. We really need to unpack the life of the prolific Anglo-Irish writer and Anglican cleric, Jonathan Swift.
We do. We need to understand the environment that shapes such a sharp, unforgiving mind.
Okay, so where do we begin?
Well, Jonathan Swift was born in Dublin on November 30th, 1667. His early life was marked by a lot of instability.
Right. His father died before he was even born.
About 7 months before, yes. And his mother eventually returned to England, leaving young Jonathan Swift in the care of his uncle, Godwin Swift.
Which must have given him this complex relationship with both Ireland and England.
It did. He belonged fully to neither, and often felt exiled from both. A recurring theme in his life.
He had a solid, if maybe conventional, early education that set him up for a career in the church and politics.
He did. He attended Kilkenny College, which was one of Ireland's premier schools at the time, and then Trinity College, Dublin.
And he got his BA in 1686.
Yes, and his studies were largely focused on Aristotelian logic. This is actually critical to understanding his later satirical method.
Oh, so?
Because he systematically attacks the established logic and definitions of human nature. He uses the tools he was taught to dismantle the very system that taught him.
But he wasn't exactly a star student, was he?
The university records show him as above average, but not exceptional, no.
And then his career trajectory was just radically altered by the political turbulence of the time. The Glorious Revolution, specifically.
Yes. The political troubles forced him to leave Ireland in 1688, and this move, it led to a crucial opportunity.
This is when he gets a job with Sir William Temple.
Exactly. He secured a position as secretary and personal assistant to the English diplomat, Sir William Temple, at Moor Park. Working with Temple was foundational.
Because it gave him this inside look.
An intimate exposure to the highest echelons of English power, diplomacy, and intellectual life. It provided him first-hand material for his political satires.
And it was during this employment that he also advanced his formal education.
Precisely. He was able to pursue his MA from Hart Hall, Oxford, in 1692. And then, following Temple's death, Jonathan Swift returned to his clerical aspirations.
He was ordained as a priest in the Church of Ireland.
And received his Doctor of Divinity degree in 1702.
But the title that really stuck, the one that cemented his position in Dublin society, came a bit later.
That would be in 1713, when he was appointed Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral, Dublin. This is where he earned the sobriquet that many people still know him by today.
Dean Swift.
Dean Swift.
Now, when we look at his political alignments, things get complicated. He started as a Whig, supported the Glorious Revolution, and yet he was a staunchly high church Anglican. He famously called himself a lover of liberty.
He did.
Can we quickly define the political poles he was navigating? the Whigs and the Tories.
Certainly. In early 18th century Britain, the landscape was dominated by those two factions. The Whigs generally favored limited monarchical power and strong parliamentary authority.
And they were associated more with commercial and nonconformist interests.
Right. The Tories, on the other hand, tended to favor the established structure of the Crown and the Church of England, and their support often came from the landed gentry.
And Jonathan Swift started Whig, but then he switched to the Tory opposition.
Yeah.
Why was that switch so critical? What did it say about his principles?
It was a principled switch. While he admired the Whigs' focus on liberty, he felt they were increasingly undermining the established church and becoming, well, overly commercialized and corrupt.
So it alienated him.
It did. By shifting his allegiance, he found a better platform among the Tories and became a formidable political writer, editing the Tory journal, The Examiner.
And this is what solidified his reputation as a master of satire.
Yes, and he was equally adept at two very different modes of satire.
Okay, let's pause on those satirical modes because they are key to understanding the different tones in Gulliver's Travels. We often hear about Horatian versus Juvenalian satire. What's the practical difference for you, the listener?
It's primarily about tone and intent. Horatian satire is gentle, witty, often self-deprecating. It aims to laugh people out of their vices.
Like a playful poke.
A playful poke, exactly. You see this mode often in the Lilliput section. Juvenalian satire, however, it's bitter, angry, and moralizing.
This is the attack mode.
It attacks corruption and vice with righteous indignation. It uses scorn and harsh realism, and it's meant to shock the reader into change. The Final Voyage to the Wyndhams is the purest example of Jonathan Swift employing Juvenalian scorn.
That need for a scathing attack often put him in legal danger, didn't it?
Absolutely. The political climate was vicious. He often published his most controversial works anonymously or under pseudonyms.
Like Lemuel Gulliver.
Or Isaac Bickerstaff.
Oh,
He
yeah.
did it to protect himself from political prosecution. And this caution was entirely justified, especially when you look at his later triumph in Ireland.
Let's discuss that triumph.
Yeah.
The Drapier's Letters. This is where he goes from an English political writer to a full-blown Irish patriot.
The Drapier's Letters in 1724 targeted a monopoly granted by the English government to a man named William Wood to mint poor-quality copper coinage for Ireland.
A scheme that would have tanked the Irish economy.
Deeply damaged it, yes. Jonathan Swift, writing under the pseudonym M.B. Drapier, published a series of letters passionately denouncing the scheme, and it was so effective
And popular.
and generated such unified resistance that the government was forced to withdraw the coinage. This single-handedly earned him the status of an Irish national hero.
And yet, despite this political power and literary renown, he never achieved the English clerical appointment he really wanted. He was sort of forced back into a role he saw as exile.
That was Queen Anne. She disliked him immensely.
Why?
It's largely attributed to her belief that his earlier work, A Tale of a Tub, was scandalous or even blasphemous. This blocked his hopes for a position in England, leading to what he termed virtual exile back in Dublin.
And that sense of being passed over, of indignation at governmental corruption, it must have fueled the darkness of his later satire.
Heavily, including Gulliver's Travels.
His final years were sadly marked by decline, weren't they? Physical and mental.
They were. He suffered from a severe illness, which is often diagnosed now as Meniere's disease. It caused debilitating vertigo and deafness.
It got so bad that guardians had to be appointed to manage his affairs.
Yes. He died in 1745, leaving a truly fitting philanthropic legacy. His fortune of £12,000 was left to found a hospital for the mentally ill.
St. Patrick's Hospital for Imbeciles.
That's the one.
Okay, so with that context, we can really see how Jonathan Swift, a man intimately familiar with the highest levels of politics, religious schism, and intellectual hypocrisy, structured the journey of Lemuel Gulliver.
Yes. The novel is not merely a collection of adventures. It's a meticulously crafted machine of structural reversals and escalating critiques.
And we start with the most famous and maybe the most seemingly innocent journey. The land of the tiny people.
A voyage to Lilliput. Gulliver is shipwrecked, washed ashore, and finds himself among the Lilliputians, who are less than 6 inches tall.
The Man Mountain.
Initially, yes. After promising good behavior, he becomes the Man Mountain and a great favorite of the royal court.
The primary satirical target here is the magnification of triviality, right? We're watching tiny people act out the grand, absurd dramas of European politics.
Precisely. The Lilliputians focus intensely on ritual and status. We see candidates for high office competing in these absurd ways.
Like leaping over a thread held by the emperor.
Exactly. Leaping over or creeping under it. It's a clear mockery of the petty, often demeaning court rituals required to gain favor in England.
And the most famous example of this triviality is the great political and religious rift between the big Indians and the little Indians.
Absolutely. The conflict is based entirely on which end of a soft-boiled egg a person cracks.
Seriously.
The big Indians maintain tradition, while the little Indians, based on a royal decree, crack the smaller end. It's a brilliant send-up of pointless religious conflict,
Specifically, the long, bloody history of conflict between Catholics and Protestants.
which often hinged on minute points of doctrine or ritual. Jonathan Swift is basically saying the political and religious wars that plague us are no more meaningful than a disagreement over breakfast.
And Gulliver gets drawn right into their warfare against the rival nation Blefuscu.
He does. He helps the Lilliputians by single-handedly stealing their entire naval fleet. A massive advantage.
But his moral compass, however warped, it still exists at this point.
It does. He quickly falls out of favor when he refuses the king's demand to invade Blefuscu and commit genocide, reducing them to a mere province of Lilliput.
Then he's charged with treason, and the charges themselves just highlight the absurdity of their justice system.
Oh, the charges are a masterpiece of satirical injustice. One is for urinating in the Capitol.
Even though he did it to put out a palace fire and saved everyone.
Exactly. Another relates to his refusal to wage war. He's sentenced to be blinded, which the court views as a humanitarian compromise.
A compromise.
Yes, saving the budget by merely blinding him rather than starving him slowly. It highlights how European governments cloak barbarity in legalistic jargon.
So he escapes.
He's warned by a kind friend of the approaching mutilation, and he escapes to Blefuscu before being rescued by a passing ship.
So the first voyage teaches Gulliver, and us, that political power is often driven by petty squabbles and justified by ridiculous laws. He leaves, bringing miniature Lilliputian animals back with him as proof.
A perfect setup for the second voyage, which is a complete inversion.
A voyage to Brobdingnag, the giants.
It's a perfect inversion, not just geographically, but philosophically. Gulliver is abandoned in Brobdingnag, a land where the people are gigantic. The farmer who finds him is 72 feet tall.
So Gulliver goes from being the man-mountain to a helpless miniature insect.
He's physically humiliated almost immediately. Treated like a toy or a pet, he's constantly in danger.
Fighting off giant rats the size of dogs.
Mastiffs, yes, and monstrous wasps. The farmer exhibits him for money until he's sold to the queen. His caretaker is the farmer's kind daughter, Glumdalclitch.
And he lives in a little portable house, his traveling box.
That's right. And here, Jonathan Swift changes the satirical angle. It's no longer about small men acting big. It's about a small man trying to represent a supposedly great civilization to a genuinely great man.
The reversal of perspective.
Exactly. When Gulliver discusses the glorious state of Europe, our courts, our laws, our wars with the king of Brobdingnag, the king is completely unimpressed.
He just doesn't get it. Or rather, he gets it all too well.
He acts as Jonathan Swift's moral mouthpiece, systematically interrogating Gulliver on every aspect of European society.
So what specifically does the king find most appalling about Europe's governance?
He is appalled by the complexity and the corruption. Gulliver describes the intricate judiciary, the complicated systems of patronage, the ceaseless political maneuvering in Parliament.
And the king's conclusion.
He concludes that the laws are merely a tool for the privileged to oppress the vulnerable, and the legislators are either ignorant, idle, or completely corrupt. He tells Gulliver that Europe appears to him as a perilous race of little odious vermin.
Wow. And Gulliver, in a desperate attempt to impress the king, offers the greatest, most devastating secret of European knowledge.
He offers the secret of gunpowder. He details the chemical secrets, how to manufacture and use this technology, believing this will elevate his status.
And the king's reaction is?
Absolute horror and disgust. He immediately rejects this knowledge, calling it terrible and demonic. He insists that he would rather risk the destruction of his own kingdom than adopt such a nefarious weapon.
That moment is so important. The king of Brobdingnag, this figure of moral wisdom, rejecting the defining knowledge of the modern era.
It is the first great structural failure for Gulliver. His worldview is shattered. He's told that the achievements he cherishes are viewed by a truly wise ruler as merely the vices of vicious vermin.
How does he leave?
He departs accidentally. His traveling box is seized by a giant eagle and dropped into the sea, where he's rescued by human sailors.
So now we get to part 3, and the focus shifts again, from size to intellectual detachment and impracticality.
A voyage to Laputa and the land of projectors. After a run-in with pirates, Gulliver is rescued by the flying island of Laputa.
This kingdom is governed not by physical size or political structure, but by pure, abstracted, and utterly useless theoretical knowledge.
Laputa is a magnificent piece of Jonathan Swift's Juvenalian satire. He's targeting the Enlightenment's excesses, specifically bureaucracy and the contemporary obsession with theoretical science.
The Royal Society in England.
Exactly. The Laputans are dedicated entirely to music, mathematics, and astronomy. They are so absorbed in abstraction that their eyes are always turned inward or upward.
Leading to physical neglect and impracticality. I've heard about the famous flappers.
Yes. The Laputan men need servants, the flappers, who gently strike their ears or mouths with a bladder filled with peas or pebbles to remind them to speak, listen, or even pay attention.
So they're completely in their own heads.
Completely. Their clothing is adorned with astronomical symbols, but it's badly made and ill-fitting because they despise practical, applied science.
And this detached intellectualism affects how they govern their subjects on the ground kingdom of Balnabarbi.
They don't rule with traditional armies. They maintain control by hovering over the land, and if the ground cities rebel, they can either obscure the sun and rain to ruin crops or, more violently,
Throw massive rocks down onto them.
Right. It's a literal physical demonstration of how detached intellectual elites can oppress the practical working class.
When Gulliver tours Balnabarbi, he witnesses the catastrophic results of this blind pursuit of pointless science at the Grand Academy of Legato. This is Jonathan Swift mocking the Royal Society directly.
Absolutely. The Royal Society fostered a spirit of empirical inquiry, which Jonathan Swift generally supported, but he despised the impractical, wasteful, and often bizarre nature of some of the experimental schemes.
He saw it as a waste of public funds and a distraction from common sense.
That's it in a nutshell.
What are some of those spectacularly ridiculous projects in the Academy of Legato?
Oh, they are legion. They're meant to demonstrate laborious effort applied to fundamentally pointless tasks. They waste resources trying to extract sunbeams from cucumbers to warm the air in winter.
Sunbeams from cucumbers.
They try to turn human excrement back into its original food. They try to soften marble for use in pillows.
And the political projects are just as absurd.
Even more so. There's a professor trying to uncover political conspiracies by examining the excrement of suspicious persons.
I'm sorry, what?
He believes the contents can reveal hidden treasonous thoughts. Another tries to reform language by eliminating all nouns and verbs, insisting people should just hold up the actual objects they're discussing.
Forcing them to walk around carrying sacks full of things.
Exactly. It satirizes the popular, though doomed, attempt to create a universal language based on real things rather than abstract words.
And in this section, Gulliver takes side trips, including one to Glubdubdrib, the island of magicians, where he talks to ghosts.
He discusses history with the ghosts of figures like Julius Caesar and Aristotle. This is Jonathan Swift inserting himself into one of the era's most crucial intellectual debates, the ancients versus moderns.
Right, the debate over whether contemporary culture had surpassed the achievements of the classical world.
Yes. And by conjuring the ghosts of the great classical figures, Jonathan Swift uses them to critique the supposed superiority of the moderns. He suggests that modern historians have corrupted the truth and that many contemporary heroes are actually cheats and villains.
He also encounters the Struldbrugs on Lugnag. This is a chilling vision of immortality.
It is a profound moment. The Struldbrugs are immortal, but they are not eternally young. Gulliver initially idealizes them, thinking of the wisdom they must represent.
But the reality is horrific.
He soon learns the truth. They suffer the full decline of advanced old age. They become envious, legally dead at 80, losing their civil rights, enduring endless physical and mental decay. It strips away the fantasy of eternal life.
It's a corrective, arguing that life is only valuable because it's finite.
Yes, the Struldbrugs become a burden, existing in a state of eternal jealous misery.
Finally, Part 3 contains one of Jonathan Swift's most transparent and personal political allegories. The Rebellion of Lindolino. We need to spend some time here.
This 5-paragraph episode is a direct allegory for the Drapier's Letters affair, which made Jonathan Swift an Irish patriot. Lindolino represents Dublin, and the flying island Laputa represents the oppressive power of the British government.
So explain the direct parallel. The Drapier's Letters dealt with Wood's halfpence.
Yes, the British government had granted a patent to William Wood to mint poor-quality copper halfpence for Ireland. It was a monopoly that the Irish feared would devalue their economy and enrich an Englishman at their expense.
A grave threat to Irish autonomy.
Exactly. And Jonathan Swift mobilized the Irish population against it.
Using the character of the Drapier.
He argued that accepting the coins was a fundamental violation of Irish self-governance. This unified Irish resistance and forced the British government to back down, making him a national hero.
So, when Lindalino, which is Dublin, rebels against Laputa, Britain, by trying to pull the flying island down, that is Jonathan Swift enshrining his proudest political victory into the text.
It's his explicit political commentary. It's no wonder this section was censored in the first English editions. And Jonathan Swift fought so hard to have it restored.
Okay, that brings us to the final and darkest voyage.
Part 4. A Voyage to the Land of the Houyhnhnms. This is where Jonathan Swift uses the darkest form of Juvenalian satire and completes the great structural reversal.
Gulliver, now a captain, suffers a mutiny and is abandoned.
He lands in a place ruled by the Houyhnhnms, a race of highly rational talking horses who manage a race of grotesque, savage humanoids called yahoos.
The yahoos are the embodiment of base human nature, stripped of all reason or civilization.
They're crude, hairy, and exhibit all the vices Jonathan Swift despised.
Yeah.
Greed, filth, and violence. Their greatest motivation is a perverse love of shining stones, which they hoard.
And the Houyhnhnms, conversely, are physically magnificent and embody pure, benevolent reason.
Their society is perfect and moral. They live by maxims of virtue and are so purely rational that they have no concept of lying. They only have the word for saying the thing which is not.
So their actions are governed purely by reason and utility.
Which leads to an unemotional but entirely ethical civilization.
And Gulliver looks at the yahoos, sees their vices, and begins to recognize his fellow Europeans in them.
This is the core of the psychological horror. Gulliver realizes that his entire civilization is just a collection of yahoos using reason only to exacerbate and add to the vices nature gave them.
He becomes completely misanthropic.
Rejecting his own human form and culture in favor of the rational horses.
But even the Houyhnhnms, in their pure rationality, show a flaw, or at least a limit, when they decide Gulliver's fate.
Yes, their society is built on utility. They hold an assembly and rationally decide that Gulliver, a yahoo with a dangerous semblance of reason, is a potential threat. They command him to leave.
A cold, logical decision.
Unemotional but decisive. Their focus on the collective good overrides any sense of empathy or individual kindness.
And the final contrast comes with his unwilling rescue by the Portuguese ship captain, Pedro de Mendes.
Mendes is crucial. He represents the best of humanity. The text notes he is a wise, courteous, and generous person, and he treats the now utterly mad and repulsive Gulliver with immense kindness.
Yet Gulliver is disgusted by him.
Utterly. He sees Mendes's human form and kindness as just a pathetic veneer over his innate yahoo-ness.
And the novel ends with Gulliver back in England, a broken man.
A total recluse. He avoids his wife and children because they smell like yahoos to him. His ultimate act of rejection is spending hours a day conversing with his horses in the stable.
Referring their company to his human family.
It's the final, absurd destination of his adopted misanthropy.
Okay, so we've tracked Gulliver through 4 forms of corruption. Now let's dive into the critical heart of the work. Jonathan Swift was holding up a mirror, but the central question remains. Was he laughing with us in the first parts, or viciously and cynically at us in the end?
The misanthropic tone in Part 4 is the central critical battleground. Critics often disagree on whether Jonathan Swift is genuinely cynical about mankind, or
if he's using Gulliver's extreme reaction as another piece of high-level satire.
Exactly. Scholars like Case, Crane, and Stone lean heavily toward the latter, arguing that Gulliver's misanthropy is a comical exaggeration.
So if we're meant to view Gulliver's opinion as a form of madness, how does Jonathan Swift make sure we don't accidentally mistake that for his own genuine belief?
He uses a few key techniques. First, the premise itself is absurd. Rational horses are a convention of beast fables, a genre that playfully elevates animals over men, but which is never meant to be taken as a literal prescription for society.
Right, it's a fantasy setup.
And second, he relies heavily on that structural inversion we mentioned, specifically attacking the classical definition of man.
This is where the Latin comes in. Homo est animal rationale.
Exactly. For centuries, the academic definition of humanity was homo est animal rationale. Humans are rational animals. Jonathan Swift, by presenting animals as purely rational and humanoids as purely savage, intentionally inverts this logic,
He's suggesting we're not rational animals, but merely animals capable of using reason.
and often only using it to amplify our vices.
But because the premise of a perfectly rational horse society is fundamentally utopian and absurd, the conclusion Gulliver draws, that all men are yahoos, must also be a reductio ad absurdum.
Precisely. The inversion makes Gulliver's final reaction, shunning his family, talking to horses, seem absurd. It's meant to provoke a reaction, not to be a philosophical doctrine. Jonathan Swift is satirizing the misapplication of reason.
And Gulliver's madness is the clearest example of that misapplication.
It is, and the role of Pedro de Mendes is pivotal here. He exists to demonstrate that Gulliver's worldview is narrow-minded and just plain wrong.
He's the evidence that contradicts Gulliver's entire philosophy.
Yes. Gulliver's inability to recognize Mendes's wise, courteous, and generous nature proves that the satirized perspective Gulliver's is the flawed one. Jonathan Swift is using Mendes to show the capacity for human virtue, even as Gulliver is rejecting it.
The text often uses physical revulsion as a satirical tool, especially in Brobdingnag, where Gulliver expresses intense disgust at the giant women's bodies. This has drawn accusations of misogyny.
This specific use of disgust is intensely analyzed, and most scholars argue the misogyny is intentionally satirical. It's meant to mock Gulliver himself, not women.
So what's the purpose of subjecting Gulliver to that specific form of disgust?
It's tied to the theme of emasculation and the critique of detached science. Critics argue that Gulliver is a gendered object of satire. His masculine authority comically seems to be in jeopardy throughout the whole book.
Is the weakling in Lilliput, the toy in Brobdingnag, an inferior animal among the Houyhnhnms?
Exactly, and the Brobdingnag experience acts as a humiliating reversal of his status as a man of science.
How does that connect to the microscope?
There's a link to the pocket microscope. Scientific instruments were the epitome of masculine knowledge. But in the 18th century, the pocket microscope became a favored curiosity for women, causing many male scientists to dismiss it as a frivolous tool.
And Gulliver's journey reverses this.
Perfectly. He starts out as the scientist, recording his measurements, but in Brobdingnag, he literally becomes the object of female amusement and study, a women's plaything. His horror at their visible defects is a horror at his own reduction.
Okay, let's return to the beginning and unpack Jonathan Swift's most famous political joke, the egg-cracking dispute. This is the purest form of Horatian satire in the text.
The conflict between the big Endians and the little Endians, which plunges Lilliput into civil war, is brilliantly simple. A population split over an arbitrary rule that's hardened into theological doctrine.
And we know this was a clear jab at real-world conflicts, targeting the petty divisions between Catholics and Protestants.
Jonathan Swift is essentially screaming that all the blood spilled over theological nuances is as ridiculous as fighting over breakfast. The cultural staying power of this tiny joke, however, is immense.
It resonates far beyond the 18th century, right into the modern technical world.
It does. The nomenclature used for this utterly trivial conflict has been absorbed into a very serious and specialized field, computer architecture.
You're kidding.
Nope. The terms big endian and little endian are now technical standards used to describe two possible ways of ordering the bytes of data in computer memory.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
As I was saying, the choice of which end of the data string to read first is technically trivial. Both methods work equally well. But a system built one way is completely incompatible with a system built the other way.
Causing massive headaches for engineers.
Right. It creates a modern-day technical schism, a holy war over a functional triviality.
A perfect analogy for the egg-cracking dispute.
Precisely. The technical nomenclature was chosen specifically as a nod to Jonathan Swift. That just shows the extraordinary, enduring power of his satire.
Let's delve into how this book came to exist and the drama around its publication. It wasn't just written by Jonathan Swift alone, but as part of a literary movement.
Right. The composition of Gulliver's Travels began as early as 1713. Jonathan Swift, along with friends like Alexander Pope and John Gay, formed the Scribblerus Club.
And their core mission was literary satire.
Specifically to mock popular, sensational, and often implausible literary genres that were flooding the market at the time, especially traveler's tales.
So it started as a collaborative mockery of adventure stories like Robinson Crusoe, which blurred the line between fact and fiction.
Exactly. Gulliver's Travels was Jonathan Swift's part of that broader project. By August 1725, the full manuscript was finished.
Given its openly anti-Whig and anti-establishment tone, Jonathan Swift must have been terrified of prosecution.
He was extremely worried. The work was so volatile that he took great pains to conceal his authorship. He allegedly had the manuscript copied by another writer, so his own handwriting couldn't be used as evidence in court.
The manuscript was secretly delivered to the publisher Benjamin Mott in 1726, who immediately knew he had a hit on his hands.
A guaranteed bestseller, but he also feared legal action. To protect himself, Mott cut or altered the worst offending passages.
So the first edition was a politically cautious, somewhat neutered version of Jonathan Swift's original vision.
That's right. Mott cut key satirical material like the detailed descriptions of the court contests in Lilliput, and he completely omitted the Lindolino section.
But despite this censorship, the anonymous publication was an immediate sensation.
The book took London by storm. The anonymity only fueled speculation, leading to widespread discussion.
But the canonical text, the one that Jonathan Swift truly approved, didn't appear until years later.
The definitive version arrived in 1735, printed by an Irish publisher named George Faulkner. He had access to a heavily annotated copy of Mott's work, which restored much of the original content.
And it included Jonathan Swift's furious reaction to the initial censorship.
It did. Faulkner's edition included a scathing letter written by Jonathan Swift himself, where Gulliver complains that the publisher, Mott, had so altered the original that he could hardly know mine own work.
His way of reclaiming his satire.
Exactly, ensuring his most vicious attacks were restored.
The book's initial success was just unparalleled.
It was. It had the unique quality of entertaining everyone from the highly educated to children.
However, this shift into juvenile misanthropy in Part 4 generated significant backlash, even among Jonathan Swift's friends.
Indeed. Viscount Bolingbroke was one of the first to criticize the novel for its overt use of misanthropy. They felt he went too far in condemning human nature entirely.
And William Makepeace Thackeray, writing later, delivered what might be the most famous literary attack on Jonathan Swift.
Thackeray described the work as blasphemous and overly severe. He struggled to reconcile the witty author of Part 1 with the cynical moralist of Part 4.
Yet, despite the controversy, the book's status only grew.
Its enduring appeal lies in its insightful social commentary, which remains relevant far past the specific political targets of the 1720s. It's secured its position as a cornerstone of English literature.
And the book's linguistic impact is truly exceptional. It cemented specific terms into common English vocabulary.
Absolutely. Lilliputian is now an adjective for anything small or delicate. Brobdingnagian is a synonym for gigantic. And of course, Yahoo is commonly used for ruffian or thug.
Beyond terminology, the book is considered a critical forerunner of modern genres, especially science fiction.
It's often classified as proto-science fiction due to its concept of imagined, scientifically defined cultures and strange technologies, like the flying island of Laputa.
And you can see echoes of the Four Voyages in much later science fiction.
Certainly. Isaac Asimov used the flying island concept. Robert Heinlein wrote about a planet with intelligent horses ruling wild, Yahoo-like humanoids, a direct mirror of the Wynnum Society.
And the book's influence extends even beyond literature into classical music.
Yes. Georg Philipp Telemann composed a Gulliver suite for 2 violins, which directly captured the scale differences through musical structure. He included a Lilliputian chaconne and a contrasting Brobdingnagian gig.
That shows a truly deep cultural impact spanning across the arts, science, and technology.
It really does. So to summarize our deep dive, Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels delivers 3 central statements. First, the voyages systematically expose the flaws of civilization, moving from the petty differences in Lilliput to the absolute degradation of human nature among the Yahoos.
Second, the structural reversals are key.
They constantly force you to question your perspective. Gulliver's contempt for the Lilliputians is perfectly mirrored by the King of Brobdingnag's contempt for Europeans,
Forcing you to see your own world as odious vermin.
And finally, the text argues that reason, which is theoretically the defining trait of humanity, is often perverted and used solely to amplify our vices. A terrifying statement driven home by Gulliver's eventual rejection of his own kind.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Jonathan Swift's masterpiece of indignation. What stands out as the ultimate moral choice in the entire narrative is the King of Brobdingnag's reaction to technology, specifically his rejection of gunpowder as something too terrible to ever be adopted.
A powerful moment.
Jonathan Swift's own epitaph asks us to imitate him, if you can, as a champion of liberty, noting that his fierce indignation can no longer injure the heart. This leaves us with a final thought drawn directly from the source material. If the king of Brobdingnag represents true wisdom, does the acquisition of certain knowledge, especially destructive knowledge like the chemical secrets of gunpowder, inevitably lead to corruption? Or is the capacity for ethical self-limitation, the refusal to wield destructive power, the only true measure of civilization?